Hello, I hope you're taking care of yourself. If you're new here, my name is Lexi, and today I'm going to be running you guys through my seasonal TBR for the winter. This is the second time out that I've done it this way. I did a summer TBR about 3 months ago, maybe closer to 4. Some people do them every month, but that's just honestly too much commitment for me. I'm very much a mood reader, and I also have this cool, fun, black and white way of seeing my own morality, so saying that I'm going to read books and then not reading them feels too much like lying. So here I am, picking out a smaller amount of books every few months that I actually am going to be prioritizing during the season, so that way, if you want to, you can follow along. That's kind of the point with this. And in the spirit of that, in the spirit of accountability, I want to highlight off the jump these 2 books from my fall TBR, which were complete failures from last season. Don't get it twisted, okay? Everything else on that list was successful, but these 2 I did not get to, and as a result, they're going to be a part of this list as well. So if I haven't read them by spring, I give you guys full permission to egg my house. This is a 2-strike system, okay? I get one more shot. If you've forgotten, Pachinko is a historical fiction family saga. It's one of my friend's favorite books as well, so it's like double embarrassing that I didn't read this one. It's just a long book, okay? And I feel like I have to be in the right mood for this to really hit, and that mood just did not exist during the fall era of my life. But this winter, I'm going to be making this happen. And then this one, On the Savage Side, is inspired by the real-life story of a serial killer that was in Ohio, and it centers on these 2 twins who end up being in danger of becoming victims of that serial killer. And this is the newest book that's by the author of Betty, which, for the record, is one of, if not my absolute favorite book that I read in 2023. I'm just afraid of it, okay? The emotional damage that Betty caused to my very fragile psyche was profound. And I feel like I just wanted to read this during an era where I felt somewhat at peace, and unfortunately, the waters in this brain have been roiling for a little bit, okay? But I promise that I'm gonna make it happen. I'm going to read it. So yeah, if I don't finish those, I'm gonna be investing in a dartboard with my own face on it because I'll just be so embarrassed. But once again, everything else from my last video, like 85% of my fall TBR, I conquered it, okay? I had like a B average. So consider this one to be an actual realistic commitment as well. You're gonna be getting my takes on these this winter, okay? You might even see them in some videos if you're lucky. I divided this list up into 3 different sections. Now, have they been compiled in a way that makes actual sense? That's arguable, but I feel like it's more fun this way, so it's what we're gonna be doing. I'm just gonna go one by one, and I can't spoil them because I haven't read them, so you don't have to worry about that one. But before we get into that, jumping right in with a word from today's sponsor, which is Pair Eyewear. I've worked with Pair before on my TikTok channel, and these are still my go-to clear frames. I think that they look great. They're really good for showing off makeup. But the cool thing about Pair is that in addition to the glasses just looking pretty good without any attachments, they also specialize in making these top frames that you can just magnetically snap on to whatever Pair base frame that you might have. And they can completely transform the whole vibe of your outfits just by snapping on a top frame. And you can get these in so many different colors, so many different patterns. But the best new technology that this includes is the ability to transform your glasses into prescription sunglasses, which are just so convenient if you go outside a lot or if you drive. I always wear these glasses whenever I go on road trips. It's super duper easy to navigate the website and find a pair that'll work for you. They have this virtual try-on feature where you can try on like the entire website to find a base frame that works with your face shape and your needs, and then you can get as many top frames as you want from their entire massive collection. I just got these Van Gogh inspired top frames that I absolutely love. I think they're so cute. They are so classy, just a great pop of color for a neutral fit. So if you, like me, have made having bad vision into a part of your personal style and brand, I would strongly recommend giving Pair a try. Like, it's so simple. It's literally just magnets, but every time I wear these glasses, I feel like an innovator. If you're interested, you can click the link in my description and use the code NewlyNova15 to get 15% off your first pair. And thank you to Pair Eyewear for sponsoring both this video and also my immaculate style. I really appreciate it. You guys rock. Okay, jumping back in, we're just gonna get right into it. I've titled this first group Books for a Snow Day. We get a lot of snow normally up here in Wisconsin, the Arctic North of the continental United States, and sometimes you just don't want to leave the house because it requires you to perform manual labor in order to open your front door. So this next set is books that I really want to take my time with on days like that. They're books that theoretically will require a larger than average amount of brain power for me to really enjoy. And the first book like that is Biography of X by Catherine Lacey. I feel pretty bad that I can't remember the exact reviewer that said this, but I remember going out to the bookstore and buying this as soon as I saw it described as an AP Lit version of The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I don't know how true that is, but I just found that to be an incredibly compelling portrait. But the premise of this either way is really fascinating. This book is a fictional biography that was written by a widow after the death of her wife. And her wife was this incredibly iconoclastic and private person. And nobody, not even her wife, really knew much about her background when she was alive. But after her death, her wife is dealing with so much grief that she decides that the only way she's really going to be able to move on is to create a memorandum of who her wife was before her death, which requires her to really dig deep into her wife's personal history in a way that nobody has ever done. And obviously her personal history is weird. It's bizarre. It's messy. The entire book book takes place in this alternate version of the United States where the southern continental US split off after World War II and forms this fascist theocracy, which weaves itself into the story somehow. You have to imagine that's relevant in some way to X's life, but it's just really interesting lore. And I just really love books that play with form in creative ways like this one seems to. So it's something I'm looking forward to for sure. Okay, next up is The Library at Mount Char. And I know essentially nothing about this book because I've heard that that's the optimal way to go into the story. So the only thing that I really know is that this involves a group of people who are studying underneath this guy that they call Father and who they suspect might be a physical incarnation of God. And they all live together at this weird ass library and do things that are probably weird and culty, just based on the vibe, okay? That's the energy that I'm getting here. And the actual book follows the story of what happens after this guy that they call Father mysteriously disappears. And chaos, I imagine, ensues after that point. And this comparison is once again like very meaningless because I haven't actually read this book, but this book is shelved in my head in the same place as The Last House at Needless Street, just in terms of being very esoteric, kind of spooky vibes, like what's happening in this really weird house. That's the energy that I get from this book, and that's also the energy that I got from that book. And I loved The Last House on Needless Street when I read it this October. So if this is anywhere near as good as that, I'll be very happy. Next book I have in this category is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. This book is a post-apocalyptic literary fiction novel that follows this troupe of traveling actors and musicians who are just roaming around the wasteland that was once the Midwest. And the apocalypse that happened that created all of these wastelands was this flu that killed off 99+% of the population. So, you know, not a great time. And the reason why all of these people are in this troupe is because they're really focused on preserving art and culture that would otherwise have been lost entirely following the collapse of society, as you would probably expect. But they don't want to let that happen, and this book is the story of them, to my knowledge, facing some kind of existential threat. It's worth noting that this is another Shakespeare-influenced book. For those of you who have been here for a second, If We Were Villains was a very hit-or-miss experience for me, just because I'm very unfamiliar with his work. I felt like I was missing a lot of crucial background that could have given me just a more complete reading experience, and I might not be ready for another Shakespeare book, but lots of people widely consider this to be a masterpiece, and this is one of my best friends, like very beloved favorite authors, and so it is on the list. Next up I have The Dutch House by Anne Patchett, and this book is supposed to be kind of a family saga in terms of vibe, but it only follows one generation of the family, really focusing on these two siblings who grow up in a house, the Dutch house, who would have guessed, before ultimately being cut off and disowned by their evil stepmother once they grow up. And so these two siblings are thrown to the streets, basically, and thrown into poverty. And they really have to lean on each other and nurture what ends up being an incredibly complicated sibling dynamic in order to survive and move forward into the future. This book is obviously supposed to be very character-driven. It takes place over their entire lives. I think it follows them from like when they're born to maybe when they die. And I like books like that, okay? I love seeing the entire picture, and I also feel like that's the type of literary fiction where even though it's mostly character-driven, like there might not be a lot happening in the plot, it can still feel like it's pretty fast-paced because years are passing. Like you're really seeing them change across an additional dimension of time that doesn't always exist in books like this. Anne Patchett, the author of this, is also an author I've really been meaning to get to for a while. I've heard that she is absolutely brilliant, just really beautiful writing. And I picked this book specifically because it's described as having like dark fairy tale energy. And I love fractured fairy tales in books. So anything with that kind of vibe, I feel like there's a pretty high likelihood that I'll really enjoy it. So this is going to be my gateway into her writing. I hope that I really end up loving it. The Dutch House. It's on the list. And last book in my books for a snow day section, the books where I feel like I'm really gonna need my brain, I have The Night Parade. One thing about me is that as I continued to make book content, I became extremely picky about what I accept from publishers. And this is the book that I accepted this year that I think I'm most excited to read. As you can see, it's like subtitled A Speculative Memoir. And the book is about the author growing up and dealing with undiagnosed bipolar disorder, but the way that the story is told weaves in stories from Japanese folklore and mythology, complete with these like gorgeous images that separate out chapters. Like, look at that. Hello? And the reason that she chose to structure the book this way, to my knowledge, is because she was very frustrated by the way that medicine is so oriented towards recovery, especially when for many people with mental illness, regardless of how much they try, like their mental illness is going to be chronic for their entire lives. Like they can't just recover enough to the point where it goes away. And it's that feeling of discomfort within the world of psychiatric care that led her to be inspired to write this book the way that she did, which I think that's so cool. I think that's such a great idea for a story. And this book was compared to In the Dream House, which is one of my all-time favorite memoirs, especially for the ways that it plays with form. And then also The Collected Schizophrenias, which is an essay collection that I read, I think last year, maybe in 2021. That was just incredibly insightful in terms of its coverage for mental health. So I was and am really, really pumped to have the opportunity to read this book. And also, again, like, it's such a pretty edition. I could die. Like, the full color illustrations, they were done by her sister. That's tender. I'm really excited for this one. Okay, the next category for this list is books that have cozy winter vibes. And I was very broad with this. Like, I'm probably not going to be reading any Christmas romances. It's just not really my thing. The books that I chose are books that I feel like you would enjoy more if you were reading them while wearing a pair of plaid flannel pajamas and just cozied up underneath a heated blanket with a cup of hot chocolate or something. That's the energy that I was trying to put forth with these next 4. The first book I have to demonstrate that is Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. Other than Check and Mate, which is not on this list because I finished it yesterday, you'll be seeing more of that book soon. This was my other big 2023 romance book that I was really excited about. Abby Jimenez, for context, wrote Part of Your World, which was one of my favorite romances this year. In a year, by the way, where I was reading a lot more romance than I usually would just because of a series that I was doing on TikTok. And that book had things inside of it that maybe would have annoyed me if I wasn't so distracted by just, in my opinion, how perfect of a man the male lead was. Just a flawlessly executed book boyfriend. I loved that guy. And I've actually heard even better things about this book, which is really exciting. This follows the best friend of the main character from Part of Your World. You totally don't have to read these in order, by the way, like they're interconnected standalones. A lot of romance novels are like that. But the hook on the back of this book, not a spoiler, literally on the back of the book, is that apparently to save the life of the main character's brother, the male love interest in this book gives him a kidney. And then somehow that leads to them fake dating as well. Just what an absolute stud. That's one way to introduce yourself. I've also heard that this book has pretty good anxiety representation. It has them writing letters to each other. It just has so many signs that this is for me. So definitely top of my list of books to cuddle up with this winter. Next up on Winter Vibes books is A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed, also an author who published one of my favorite books that I read this year, Juniper and Thorn. The more that I think about Juniper and Thorn, the more that I absolutely love it. It was just incredibly unique and well done. I still don't think that that book is for everybody, just given how absurdly dark it is, but I cannot emphasize to you enough how much that book was for me. And as a result, when I heard that Ava Reed was releasing their young adult debut, obviously I had to pick it up. Like, it was always going to happen this way. And given that it's young adult, there's just no way that this is going to be as darkly horrific as Juniper and Thorn was, but I also just really love Ava Reed's writing style. Their books just have this very folkloric whimsy in their prose and in their atmosphere that I really, really love. And also, a reviewer that I really like on TikTok, Emma Skies, ended up giving the arc of this book an absolutely glowing review when it came out earlier this year, so that made me even more excited as well to read this. Premise-wise, this book is about a girl who is an architecture student that ends up getting this insane opportunity to go to the estate of her literary hero and just redesign it from the ground up after this literary hero has passed away. And when she arrives there, she realizes that the house is in what can only be described as a state of decay. It has just been absolutely rocked by flooding and by other things. But long story short, when she's there, she ends up meeting this guy whose name is Preston. He's a literature student who's doing his own investigations on the estate into the author, and the two of them end up discovering that things are not as they seem at this mansion. Something is weird. I've seen this book described as a dark academia fairy tale if it were outside of the academy, because obviously they're at this kind of haunted house mansion instead, but it's still very much like an academic atmosphere inside of the book, and I'm just really excited for this one. Okay, next up is Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. Did I pick this book partially because the cover of it reminds me of ice, which therefore reminds me of winter? Maybe I did, but I also feel like Uprooted, which is a book that this is often compared to, it's another one of Naomi's works, has strong, cozy fantasy winter energy. I mean, don't get me wrong, that book also has some pretty serious themes, but like overwhelmingly to me, it reads like a fairy tale. It reads like something that you engage with during the winter season when you're very cold. So that's why I'm giving this one a try. In terms of premise, it's supposed to be a really loose Rumpelstiltskin retelling, but the operative word there is loose, from what I've heard about this book at least, because what is supposed to be most impressive about this story is the way that it weaves together several different perspectives of different women who are all bonding together in order to preserve the fate of this world, which is under threat by these evil wintry fae people because the population had learned of this original girl who was able to turn silver into gold, much like Rumpelstiltskin. I don't think I'm really doing a very good job describing this book. It feels like one of those fantasy stories that is complicated enough to be like impossible to synopsize unless you actually know what's going on, which for the record is also how I felt about Uprooted, and that book ended up being very unique and very interesting. So I still think this is going to be really, really good. I just like don't know how to convince you to have the same thoughts that I have, so I'm gonna stop trying. Okay, moving on. The last book that I plan on reading, I'm actually doing as an audiobook because I want to start being the kind of girl who like does puzzles at the same time as reading books. I haven't thought of this technology in the past for some reason, but I saw like one TikTok and I was like, you are a revolutionary, like you're a genius. And this next book represents the kind of books that I want to be reading when I'm doing this. And that book is Legends and Lattes. I feel like this went super viral this year as a cozy fantasy. And to my knowledge, it's just supposed to be about this magical coffee shop that is run by this woman who wants to have a cozy life running a magical coffee shop. And she runs into like a bunch of different strangers and has conversations with them inside of her magical coffee shop. Possibly, she even finds love along the way during these conversations. You know, it's just a book with no danger. Like, it's a book that can't hurt you. But I feel like I don't normally see fluffy, cozy fantasies getting as many rave reviews as I've been seeing for this book on social media, so I'm pretty excited to see what it has in store. So yeah, catch me putting together my little puzzles and listening to my little little book. Double strength anxiety prevention activities for the winter. And my last category for this video is just a sprinkling of random shit that I also really want to read for some reason, but I don't really see other places they could go on this list, and also they don't really fit together, if I'm being honest with you. So I'm just putting them in a third category of general chaos. First off, we have Their Vicious Games. This was actually a rec, I think, for my TikTok comments, which is rare, but I've seen it described as Ace of Spades meets Squid Game / maybe The Hunger Games meets The Bachelor. And I have a soft spot for The Bachelor, okay? It's one of my worst personality traits. I will be the first to admit it. And anything that takes inspiration from The Bachelor, I will always feel compelled to read. I find it fascinating. And we'll see with this if those influences are accurate. But either way, I think that this book has a really good premise. It is about this black girl who is going to this kind of bougie private school in, I think, the American Northeast, but she ends up getting involved in some kind of controversy that gets her essentially blacklisted from all of the colleges that she was looking at, you know, all of the Ivy League schools, all of the greats, which obviously is very bad news for somebody who's high achieving. So she's really frustrated and just kind of feeling defeated, but there ends up being a potential way out for her, which is through this tournament that the family that founded her academy runs every year, where 12 women who are all exceptional in some way compete in these 3 events. And the winner of this competition is functionally adopted into this family, which obviously would open a ton of doors for them because these are like very old money white people. So the main character, Adina, is chosen to compete in this competition. And I imagine that shit will get really weird from there, like it always does in books like that. But I'm really, really excited. I always love tournaments in books, no matter what they are, especially when they're inspired by backwards reality TV shows that I definitely should not like as much as I do. And yeah, Their Vicious Games on the list. Okay, next up in the chaos group, I have Going Clear, Scientology Hollywood, and The Prison of Belief. Yep, this is a nonfiction book that's about Scientology. For those of you who don't know, I was a double major in college. I did geography and I also did religion. And now that I'm not in college anymore, I feel like I'm getting the itch again to read about cults. So it is time for this one to come off the shelf. Fun fact, I actually went on a first date to a Church of Scientology. It was my idea because I'm an agent of chaos, but basically we went in and we posed as potential people who were interested in maybe joining the church. And the way that most churches of Scientology work is that they'll give you a personality quiz, basically, to try to measure your character deficiencies, so that way they can be like, oh, you're a little bit selfish, don't worry, Scientology can cure you. It's very manipulative in that way, but me and this guy that I was with, we went in with like chosen personas. So I pretended, as I took the questionnaire, to be like the most morally upright, Christ-like figure that you could possibly imagine, and this guy pretended to be the scum of the earth. It was a fascinating experience, just with how the church leaders handled us and tried to get us to join. Their tactics are just very off the wall. Wild first date, I'll tell you that. But anyway, other than just being goofy, it's also something that has like a way bigger impact on the world than you might think, to the point of it being kind of depressing. So like with most things like this, it's just a fringe movement that I feel is important to understand. And so I will read this in order to understand it. That's how reading works. Yep. Okay, next up, you might not expect this about me, but I really enjoy divorced mom contemporary fiction. I don't know exactly what it is or why, I just find the messiness to be really fun. And this book is that, like, to a T. The Paper Palace is about a woman who I think is in her 50s, who ends up making the decision when she's staying with her husband at this childhood summer home that has been in her family forever, to cheat on him with her childhood best friend, who for some reason she could never end up with because of a tragic accident that pushed them apart in their youth. And the book is pretty simple. It just follows the decisions that she made to lead to that point, and also presumably what happens after that. And I just love the drama. I have no other reason really to be reading this book, but like this cover has just been staring at me for so long that I feel like it's time. And then last on my list, and in this category, again, as the sun is like about to set actively outside of my window, really good timing, I think, on my part, we have Scythe by Neil Shusterman. Shusterman? I don't know. And I've recently been living the rebirth of my teenage Hunger Games fixation. I watched all 4 of the original movies and then The Ballad of Songbird and Snakes in a 24-hour period, which just awoke within me a desire to read fan fiction that I have not felt this seriously for several years. And all of that fan fiction, it's not enough. I can feel myself slipping back into my dystopian phase. I can feel it coming over me like a tide. And this, Scythe, is a very acclaimed dystopian novel that came out during a time in my life when I was just not reading very many books anymore. So I completely missed it. It completely slid under my radar. It takes place in a world where basically everything that can kill you has been eradicated completely, and humans can kind of just live infinite lives forever. However, this means that population control can be a pretty serious problem, given the fact that, you know, if nobody can die and people just keep having kids into this world forever, you have some other more significant problems. And so to deal with this, people train to become scythes, who are the only people who can actually kill in this entire world. And this book follows 2 people who are chosen to become scythes, except neither of them actually wants to do it. Because as you might expect, maybe the dystopian world is problematic in some way. What? Maybe it's not like egalitarian. Maybe there are problems in the way that the society has been structured. Who's to say? But I love stories like that. I think that they are so much fun as thought experiments. And the premise for this is really, really good. I just have a feeling feeling that I'm in the right headspace for this book. Okay, but that's everything. I'm carrying you guys, so I have like slightly better lighting at the end of this video. Obviously, those books are not everything I'm going to be reading during the winter. That's actually why I pick a smaller list, so that way I can have infinite freedom, because I hate committing to anything, and when anybody tells me to do anything, it makes me not want to do it anymore, even if that person is myself and a thing is good for me. But yeah, let me know what you're reading this winter. Let me know how you're doing. Let me know what thoughts you're having during this trying time. I hate cold weather, but I hate climate change more, so it's actually kind of disconcerting that it's like only mostly miserably cold outside as opposed to completely insufferably miserably cold. State of the world. But yeah, I'll be back very, very soon this coming week with your Credence video for Christmas. What a gift to give you guys. It's like 95% scripted and also way longer than I thought it would be. So look forward to that. If you like this video, like it. If you like me, you should subscribe. It's a fun time. And I am going to go lay down. I don't have anything else to say. Bye.